Can the Colorado Avalanche survive the next 3 weeks without Nathan MacKinnon? Here's the short answer. They'd f***ing better. Welcome back, Twisters, and hey there, hockey fans. Nick here, and today I'm going to talk to you about the Colorado Avalanche because they're going to be without Nathan MacKinnon for the next 3 weeks. He is resting after sustaining a lower body injury. So the Avalanche have certainly not gotten off to the start that we expected them to. There are a number of factors that I will definitely explore, and then we'll make the case as to why the Avs may or may not be able to turn things around while MacKinnon is out. All right, so let's jump into this. So you look at the Avalanche right now, they have a record of 4-5-1. So they've played the least amount of games among teams so far. That's only 10 games, while other teams have played like 14 or so. So they sit 5th in the Central Division in terms of points percentage. I want to make that clear. And as you can tell, looking at the standings here, the Central Division is seeing a separation in the pack between the top 4 teams and the bottom 4 teams. So already teams like Colorado are finding themselves fairly outside of the playoff picture, especially since they have a -6 goal differential. Not the worst, but certainly not the best out there as well. Let's quickly look at their team statistics heading into this period without MacKinnon. So these numbers are definitely going to surprise you here. So goals for average 2.90, which is not bad, but it's 18th. Their goals against, however, very different than where they were last year. 3.60, that is second to last, only to the Arizona Coyotes. And speaking of second to last, they are also 31st when it comes to power play. You would never expect that with an Avalanche team with this kind of roster, 10.5%. However, their penalty kill is actually fairly good. 84.6% is tied for 11th. Shots on goal per game, they are averaging 32.1. That is tied for 12th. Shots against per game, they are surrendering 32.8, so slightly higher. That is tied for 21st. And their faceoff percentage is not particularly good. It is 48.6%. So why are the Avalanche struggling at this point? Well, there are a couple of factors, certainly. So first and foremost, guys like MacKinnon, along with Rantanen, Landeskog, Makar, and a couple other players have already missed a couple games here and there. But even though they've had the injury bug a little here and there, other teams have found ways to kind of overcome their ailments. Think of the Vegas Golden Knights, for example, or the San Jose Sharks, who have had a lot of players out due to COVID. You also have to consider some key departures heading into this year. So offensively, I look at guys like Brandon Saad and Jonas Donskoi, who really solidified that top 6 and gave Colorado a very strong second wave of attack and could fill in even when some of those top players were actually out of the lineup. And then defensively, you look at a guy like Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, who's now with the Tampa Bay Lightning. He's somebody who was excellent in the faceoff circle and could help limit chances for the other team. Even Ryan Graves, I know that some of you out there might find him overrated, but I don't think the numbers entirely lie behind this guy. He was defensively pretty darn good for somebody who would average under 20 minutes of ice time per game. He is now in New Jersey. Let's also look at goaltending, and this team has not been particularly good between the pipes. So Darcy Kemper, who had a couple of outstanding years with the Arizona Coyotes, in 8 games so far, he has a .908 save and a 2.89 goals against average. Now, those numbers are not atrocious by any means, but certainly below what you would expect from a starting netminder with the Avalanche. You also have to consider that his even strength save is only .896, so he's doing a wonderful job on the penalty kill with a .917 save percentage, but in terms of even strength, he has not been particularly good, whereas somebody like Grubauer last year was really good. Now, one factor going into that is that the Avalanche, as I mentioned earlier, are tied for 21st when it comes to surrendering shots. Last year, they surrendered the fewest shots in the NHL, so that was because of guys like Pierre-Edouard Bellemare. As I mentioned earlier, the team is 18th in goals for per game, so they're not scoring as much as they should be, even with the departures of guys like Saad and Donskoi. So one reason why I think they're not generating as many chances is because they're taking 90 seconds more of penalties per game than they were last year, and they were 5th in the NHL last season when it came to even strength goals. So in other words, when you find yourself in the penalty box, you're taking away opportunities, even strength, to generate some offensive chances. So that's one reason why they're not producing quite as well. One last factor that I noticed contributing to the start for this team so far is their schedule. It's been fairly challenging for them. So their first game was against Chicago, which they won. But after that, they played against St. Louis, Washington, Florida, Tampa, Vegas, St. Louis again, Minnesota, and then 2 games against this Columbus Blue Jackets team that has come seemingly out of nowhere. So these guys have had one of the tougher schedules to start, but it's going to change over the course of this month, so I'll get into that in a little bit. So how are the Avalanche going to account for MacKinnon's absence? First and foremost, let's look at the personnel shuffles. So this is what I got from Twitter here. So JT Compher should be on the first line with Rantanen and Landeskog. He has 5 goals and 4 assists so far for 9 points in 10 games. Under 20 minutes of ice time, but close to that, winning about 51% of his draws as well. And he's contributed a goal and 2 assists on the power play. That's very important with this team. As I mentioned earlier, they are second to last in the NHL. I think Compher is somebody who should have been selected by Seattle, to be frank, when it came to the expansion draft. He's somebody who I think has flown in under the radar because he's been in a reduced role compared to most of those other guys we know in the top 6. The other player I want to highlight here is the return of Valeri Nichushkin. So he played just 1 game so far this year, and he's missed 9. He's playing on the second line for Colorado, and he's been a very good all-around player for Colorado in the past couple of seasons. Not many of you would know this, but in 2020, he actually finished 8th in Selke voting. So very impressive for a guy who's not in the spotlight like somebody like a Patrice Bergeron or a Alexander Barkov or a Mark Stone. So in his last 120 games, so the past 2 seasons, he has 23 goals and 25 assists for 48 points. You put him up there in a top 6 role. This guy could be an all-around really good player for them while MacKinnon is out. Let's talk about the power play. So this team now has Landeskog, Rantanen, and Makar out there, despite no Nathan MacKinnon. And I think they can definitely get things done. So you look at Landeskog and Rantanen with the man advantage over their last 4 years. So Landeskog, 33 goals and 41 assists. Rantanen, 45 goals and 61 assists. And in his last 2 full seasons, Cale Makar has 8 goals and 33 assists on the power play. So I think they should be able to eventually break through and have more consistent results. I've seen their last couple of games against Columbus, and the power play actually doesn't look all that bad from what I've seen, but those are just highlights. Nonetheless, a guy like Bowen Byram has looked wonderful for Colorado offensively, so they're really enjoying an embarrassment of riches with a guy like Byram or Cale Makar out there. So that gives them the opportunity to have 2 good units despite 29 being out of the lineup. So I think eventually they're going to click. They're going to see more results consistently, especially with the opposition that's coming up for them too. And speaking of which, let's look at Colorado's upcoming schedule. So tonight they're playing the Vancouver Canucks. Vancouver is second to last in the Pacific Division. Then they take on San Jose, who is a surprise so far, but maybe they are overachieving a little bit. That's my favorite team, by the way. And then they take on Vancouver again, followed by Seattle, who's last in the division. So Philip Grubauer. I'm actually going to that game, by the way, because Seattle for me is a 5-hour drive, so I'll be there. Then they take on Ottawa, who's struggling despite kind of underachieving, I would have to say. Then they play the Anaheim Ducks, who are off to a good start as well, but again, could be overachieving. Then they have Dallas and Nashville. Dallas can't score, and Nashville, I don't know. I'm still not completely sold on this team despite the run that they made last season, and they're off to a pretty good start. And then they should be getting MacKinnon back more or less around the time that you see their December schedule kick in. So they face Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa. So 2 of those 3 games are certainly winnable for this team. And then lastly, I'll conclude with this. The Colorado Avalanche last year without Nathan MacKinnon, I know it was a different season and a different team, but nonetheless, without 29 out there, they were 6-1-1. So they found a way to get it done, and having Rantanen, Makar, and Landeskog out there is certainly going to better their chances. Well, guys, what do you think of Colorado to start the season and without Nathan MacKinnon for the next 3 weeks? You guys let me know down in the comments below. Hope you had a good time watching this video, and if you did, make sure you leave a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, because we're covering hockey history and culture, including analysis, jersey unboxings, history videos, and all that good stuff. You can also check out the video description down below if you want to keep up with me on Twitter and Instagram, and you can also see a link to our merch store there as well. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Once again, I'm Nick. I'll catch you Twisters later. Ciao.